Well, Dragon Folk, it is the 20th of October as of the recording of this video, and a lot of news has just dropped. Let's check it out a little bit at a time, starting with the new Commander starter deck lists and Jumpstart 2022 leaks. Welcome on in, Dragon Folk. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I know I am. I'm your host, Ashenwings, and just remember, it's not a murder of crows without probable cause. Hope you guys enjoy the joke for the day. I'm sipping on some spearmint tea, talking about the news that is now approaching us. We have a lot to go over, but mainly I wanted to go over the introduction of the Commander starter decks. I was going to make a video about this when they first aired on the news stuff, on the fact that Wizards of the Coast is making brand new Commander starter decks, kind of like this is how you can get into Commander at a very easy path, which is weird to me considering they come out with a precon every single set, so why would they need to make a starter set? I have a feeling this is, of course, again, a ploy to go, hey, new person, you see this word starter on this product? That means it's for you. You can buy it for $50. And, you know, the deck may or may not be good. But I wanted to go over some of the more notable reprints that are actually happening in these decks. Now, all of them are pretty basic in their general concept. I think they have a very straightforward method of what the deck is supposed to do. And I think that really is kind of the starter aspect of things here. But let me go ahead and give you a look into some of the cards that are going to be reprinted in this deck. There are no new cards. It's just reprints. So first, we're going to look at First Flight. This is in Azorius, which is white-blue. You'll go ahead and realize by the name, it's probably got something to do with flyers. And you'd be correct. Essentially, the entire deck is based around getting flyers out and having a bunch of cards that give flyers buffs and, you know, lords for flyers and +1s, and, you know, draw a card anytime a flyer enters the battlefield. You know, creatures with flying cost less, yada, yada. That's kind of the concept for this deck. Pretty straightforward and simple. So if you like your creatures to be above the ground, this is going to be something to check out for you. But more importantly, there are a couple of reprints in here that might suit your fancy. The first one is the Bident of Thassa. That one's a couple bucks right now, so it is not too bad. And of course, it does read whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. Now, with your creatures being flying, the odds of them doing combat damage to a player are going to be pretty good. You can also make your opponent's creatures attack. So if your opponent has a flyer that is attempting to block you, you can just make your creatures, the creatures your opponent controls attack you. And that's kind of neat. The next reprint is Gravitational Shift. This is an enchantment that is kind of like a world enchantment of sorts. Affects the whole board, right? Where creatures with flying get +2/+0, and creatures without flying get -2/-0. So it is going to benefit you as a deck that has flyers, but if your opponent has flyers, it will also benefit them. So this is going for a little bit, but I think it's, you know, you got to kind of play it with a grain of salt. You know, I don't expect there to be too much problems in the long run, because Commander, of course, is a very wide range of different things to play. So you're not just going to be going against flyers, but you know, anything that gives a -2 to power is certainly going to cause some issues with other people's decks, and enchantment removal is still very abundant. So just be aware of this one, but it is another fantastic reprint coming in First Flight. The next deck we're going to talk about is Grave Danger. This one is actually in Dimir, which is blue-black. And Dimir, this deck runs a lot in getting cards into your graveyard and then utilizing them from the grave to maybe bring them back out onto the field, or maybe even milling your opponent's hand, or discarding their hand, so on and so forth. Very much so a graveyard recursion kind of deal, so making sure your stuff hits the graveyard is not always a bad thing with this deck. And of course, there are a couple reprints that are of note in here. You do have Liliana Untouched by Death getting a reprint in here. I'm not sure. Definitely not the best Liliana. Obviously, we just had a pretty awesome Liliana of the Veil reprint in Dominar United. So that is definitely the better Liliana. But this one isn't too bad. It does what it's supposed to do for the deck's purpose. And I think that's kind of the whole point. Then, of course, the next card that we see is the Haven Ghoul Lich. So Haven Ghoul Lich essentially allows you to use your abilities. You not only get to cast creature cards from your graveyard, but you also get to utilize their abilities essentially twice for whenever that gets onto the board. And Haven Ghoul Lich will gain all of their abilities until end of turn. So, things that enter the battlefield are pretty good, but obviously Haven Ghoul Lich won't gain an enter the battlefield ability. If it's like a Lord ability, that's what you're looking for. Or even like creatures, when this creature deals combat damage, have your opponent discard a card or something. That's kind of the concept there, is just copying and utilizing stuff from the grave. But the bigger takeaway here is the fact that you can cast creature spells from your graveyard, which is huge. It's huge. You're going to be able to get a lot of advantage out of that. So that is, of course, Dimir doing the Grave Dangers deck. We're then going to look at the Chaos Incarnate deck, which is the red-black Rakdos deck. So Rakdos is a favorite of a lot of people in Pioneer right now, and there's a lot of people like Rakdos. It's very fun. It's wild. You do a bunch of damage and you kill a bunch of stuff, whether it be through damage or through kill spells, and you really control the board through destruction, pretty much. But of course, that is going to be your main goal here in this deck. You have a lot of cards that deal direct damage to any targets. You have stuff to have your opponent mill cards, discard cards. You are making sure to deal a lot of damage, get a lot of small creatures out like devils that when they die, they will do extra damage. So we're going to go over some notable reprints for Chaos Incarnate. So Chaos Incarnate actually has a reprint of Lightning Greaves in it, which is really good. Even if you don't end up using Lightning Greaves or playing Chaos Incarnate, Lightning Greaves is a fantastic card for just about any commander deck. It is one of the staple equipments of this entire format, pretty much. So having a pair of Lightning Greaves is not too shabby. Then we also have the reprint of Spiteful Visions. It's a very big control kind of card. And of course, this brings it into the chaos aspect, right? Like, do you want to do extra things? Because if you do extra things, you might take some damage. Of course, at the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. And whenever a player draws a card, Spiteful Visions deals 1 damage to that player. Now, 1 damage is not a whole lot in a game of Commander, right? But it can go crazy because it's during every draw, not every additional. So you get to draw multiple cards, or at least any player gets to draw multiple cards, but they have to take a life. And so sometimes in situations that's actually better that they take a life to get that extra card. But, again, this is another world one where you're going to see a lot of stuff talked about. It might not be the better choice, but, it's chaos, right? You gotta make the board a little shaky. All right, next we're going to actually move on to probably my favorite one out of all of these, but I've seen this somewhere. This is the Draconic Destruction deck, which is in Gruul. That's red-green. And the last time we saw a red-green dragon deck was actually in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. They came out with a pre-constructed deck for dragons specifically, which came with a lot of the cards in the structure deck. So if you bought that, you may not need to get this one, but let me tell you, there are some pretty cool reprints in here and a lot of dragon staples for those of you who are looking to make dragon commander decks or, play around with that idea. This is definitely going to be one. So first, you have a few reprints that are actually pretty fantastic. Thundermaw Hellkite. Thundermaw Hellkite's a few bucks, so that's definitely a decent pickup there. And, it's a fantastic dragon, deals extra damage to creatures with flying your opponent control, and you can tap them. So, it's just so good, Thundermaw Hellkite. Definitely clears the board for you As long as for specifically with creatures with flying. So this deck would be fantastic to go against something like the Azorius Flyer deck. So keep that in mind. I think all these decks are kind of made to go against one another in a way, and I'm sure that's why they have the starter deck feel, but that's kind of the case. The next reprint, so I usually go over 2 reprints, but there's going to be 3 for this Draconic Destruction deck. Runehorn Hellkite is going to get a reprint in this structure deck, which is pretty crazy. I don't know if you can see, right? Runehorn Hellkite hadn't been reprinted for a long time. In Commander 2016 is when this came out. His ability is really amazing, having him be able to exile himself and from the graveyard and then have everybody discard their hand and then draw 7 new cards. He's essentially a Wheel of Fortune, but a little bit more expensive. So definitely a crazy ability to see on a dragon, and it's wild that they're just having this be one of the cards in here, but definitely a fantastic reprint for sure. And then, of course, you have probably the most expensive card in this set alone, which is Dragon Tempest. This is a card back from Dragons of Tarkir. Definitely helped out a lot of decks when it came to getting their dragons out and having it gain additional abilities, right? This is an enchantment that costs 1 in a red. Whenever a creature with flying enters the battlefield under your control, it gains haste until end of turn. And whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under your control, it deals X damage to any target where X is the number of dragons you control. So, considering your entire deck is pretty much filled with dragons, you're going to be seeing a lot of damage come out if you're able to get this off. This enchantment is one of the better enchantments because, well, it doesn't affect the whole board. Much like those other ones that, you can draw an additional card on your draw step, or creatures with flying get +2/+0 and creatures without get -2/-0. This one just affects your creatures, and it absolutely is going to deal a lot of damage because dragons are pretty huge and tend to have a lot of them usually. So it's a lot of damage you get to pump out directly. The next deck we're going to talk about is Token Triumph, which is the Selesnya deck. This deck, I'm sure, as you can tell, is about making tokens, right? Selesnya is big on going wide and then giving everything +1/+1s or getting a bunch of different mana sources to bring out some bigger stuff. So that is going to be the entire point behind this deck, is to get a bunch of different little tokens out and then buffing those tokens by doing some other little shenanigans. But we'll talk about some of the notable reprints that are going to be in this commander deck. First, we have a reprint of a card from Urza Saga, a card that was only printed in Urza Saga. It's a rare, but it was not on the reserve list from what I can tell. It is Sentinel Hierophants. I hope I said that correctly. This card actually just says creatures you control have tap, add green. So it's a 3/2 druid creature. And it allows all of your creatures to essentially become mana dorks, which is really good when you have a whole ton of tokens on the field. It allows you to get a lot of different mana out. This card goes for about $11 right now, even though it's from Urza Saga and has yet to be reprinted. I'm sure it would have gone for more if it was part of the reserved list, but because it's not, it's just kind of hanging out as one of those cool little things that make other things mana rocks. But this is going to be one of those things you're going to want to go wide, and then you're going to want to make everybody have an ability to essentially make mana, which is going to be really good. And then another reprint we do have in here is a Johnny Caller of the Pride getting a reprint. One of these Planeswalkers. Obviously, we saw the completion of a Johnny in Dominaria United, but here we are going to go back and check him out back in M2013. So, of course, he's got a lot of stuff about getting +1/+1 counters on things and creating creatures and so on and so forth. So that is, again, going to follow the same concept that Token Triumph is trying to adhere to, right? Make a lot of tokens, swing all these tokens at your opponent, win the game. That is the entirety of probably the most important things to note of those decks. It looks like the Draconic Destruction deck is probably going to have the most value out of everything. Of course, a lot of people really like dragons, so you're probably going to see a lot of people picking that up. But there are fantastic reprints in just about every single one of these. I only named off a few. So feel free to check out the link in the description to see what cards come in what deck and figure out for yourself which one you want to get, if you want to get any at all. But now let's move on to probably the best spoiler that I've ever come across, because I was really, really curious how this product was going to come out, and now we finally have a little bit in it. On the weekly MTG that had come out today, we had learned more about Jumpstart 2022. That's right. You remember Jumpstart, the original one, how it's a fantastic way to, get people to learn how to play the game. There's a vast variety of cards. Some cards were first printed in Jumpstart, such as Allosaurus Shepherd, and I believe Brudevic, I think, was also first printed in there. Two very, very popular cards in Commander, as well as their other formats. So you can see why I'm excited about this. But there was a rumor, right? And we'll get to that rumor in a little bit. First, I wanted to show you guys these specific slides here. So I'm going to show you what two of the deck lists are of the several, different varieties of them. If you don't know what a Jumpstart pack is, it's 20 cards, and each little pack is themed, and it's got a certain theme. It's supposed to achieve a certain kind of thing. And of course, as Jumpstart is, you just slap two of them together and you make a deck, and that's how you play Jumpstart. So I'm going to go over what they released of two of these packs and themes are going to look like, and we'll go ahead and go over them now. So you'll see the first one, probably being my favorite, is a speedy deck list. With the speedy deck list, you will see that there is a brand new art for Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker. That's right. This also being a fantastic little thing, you should check that little bottom corner here. I'll blow it up for you so you can see this little cat face in the glass. There was rumor that there was going to be anime-inspired art in this set, and Kiki-Jiki is just one of the few cards that are getting an anime-inspired theme. So I'll show you one later, but let's go over the speedy deck list right now. So Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker, Ardaz Cobbler of War, which I do have a picture for, actually. I'll go ahead and bring them up right now. Essentially, this is a card that is just being printed for the first time, I believe, in Jumpstart. It has haste, and when the Cobbler of War or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, that creature gains +2/+0 until end of turn. You then can pay 3 and a red to create a 1/1 red goblin creature token with haste, activate only as a sorcery. So, cool thing is, of course, if you do end up making a token, it actually becomes a 3/1 with haste because of Ardaz's ability. So, pretty cool stuff. Obviously, Goblin Tribal is going to probably do some cool stuff with that. But let's go ahead and move on to the rest of the cards. So, Bolthound, Warcry Phoenix, Markov Warlord, Fiery Conclusion, Fanatical Firebrand, Nest Robber, Mud Button Torch Runner, Irreverent Revelers, Rush of Adrenaline, Swift Kick, Thriving Bluff, and 7 Mountains. So the Thriving Lands have come back from the last Jumpstart set, so pretty cool to see those in here. This obviously has a lot of cards that have to do with haste, right? Hence the speedy deck list. So keep that in mind when you are looking at, this deck. It's going to contain a lot of speedy stuff, but honestly, a Kiki-Jiki is pretty insane to get in here. Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker is a pretty sought-after card, especially in Goblins, and has some great stuff and has great use in plenty of red decks. So the fact that it's getting a reprint in here in this fantastic, cool little art, really, really great. The next pack is actually called the Snow Deck List, and this pack contains a bunch of snow creatures and utility abilities, right? But one of the new cards that has been printed in Jumpstart 2022 is Isu the Abominable, which is pretty cool because you essentially get a Yeti creature that you can make as a commander if you wanted to make a commander deck out of this. This is all based around snow, and Isu says you may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play snow lands and cast snow spells from the top of your library, and whenever another snow permanent enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay green, white, or blue. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on Isu the Abominable, which means that you can play this in Bont, Snow Bont decks. Probably going to be seeing some use soon, but it is kind of neat. 5/5 for 5. I don't see an issue with this one. This is actually very good, but it does also come with several other cards, such as Merit Lodge's Slumber, Cold Steel Heart, Avalanche Caller, Phyrexian Ironfoot, Icebind Pillar, Pilfering Hawk, Frostpeak Yeti, Chiller Pillar, Bergstrider, Winter's Rest, Crippling Chill, Shimmer Drift Veil, and 7 snow-covered islands. So this is very snow-specific. I am wondering whether or not there is another snow-esque kind of deck list in here that could possibly be mashed up with it. But this is very cool. It is crazy to see more and more snow support, especially since Kaldheim apparently didn't do too fantastic for most people in the snow aspect of things. But hey, you know, just play Redane or whatever her name is. the essentially makes the snow stuff slower. But I did want to talk about the Cold Steel Heart. So I'm going to bring up the Cold Steel Heart on the screen here. Look how absolutely gorgeous this card is. Now, most Cold Steel Hearts look kind of just barren, and it's, oh yeah, it's a Cold Steel Heart. But this is a very beautiful anime-inspired, you know, character back here. Kind of just, you know, calling forth the essence of the Cold Steel Heart. Now, Cold Steel Heart, this is obviously a reprint. These, you know, this card exists already, but it doesn't exist in this art. If there's already 2 cards that are in a new crazy art, I'm super excited to get them, right? I'm genuinely super excited to get them, and I cannot wait to possibly collect all the anime cards. I tell you, you know, with all this stuff that's going on with Wizards, you love to hate them, but you hate to love them, right? Because I you know, you want to make sure that you're not spending so much because of the fact that they're, you know, we're price sensitive customers or whatever. I love this. One, I love the Jumpstart product in general. I don't like the Jumpstart stuffs that come out core sets or the expansion sets more specifically, but these standalone Jumpstart sets are looking really, really good, and I'm actually pretty excited to check them out. So let me know in the comments down below what you guys think. Are you guys going to pick up any of these commander decks that are going to come out, the starter commander decks? Do any of them interest you? Or would you rather save your money and buy some Jumpstart stuff? Those are only 2 of the decks, by the way, for the Jumpstart that have come out. And there's probably like 30. I can't remember how many there were with the original Jumpstart, but there was a lot. So there's going to be more to come, more anime-inspired art, more crazy cool art all over the place with all the secret layers and so on and so forth. So keep your ear out for that. And while you're leaving that comment down below, telling me what you think, make sure to like the video and also subscribe to the channel as well if you have not already. We do also have a Patreon for those of you who are available. I have a ton of different tiers for people. You do not have to subscribe at the highest tier for Patreon. I appreciate it, but you do get some goodies for that. But hey, if you just wanted to throw $5 my way, I'd appreciate it a lot. So thank you all so much. Again, I do really, really appreciate your support, whether it be through Patreon or it be through just subscribing and commenting and talking amongst this community, because I'm happy to have all of you here. And I hope that together, as we climb through this cesspool that is YouTube, that we can come out on top and we can actually start getting some more high quality production things out of the way. But obviously that is for the future. For right now, I'm Ashen Wings, and I will see you all very soon. Nerd out.